what are the emerging buying trends in 2023? I know, Michael, you're data driven and everybody else has their own sources. So I'm opening it to you guys, whoever wants to jump on first.
Yeah, sure, no dramas. I can kick us off. So, um, it's been really interesting to see, particularly with the transactional data that we see from clients, just to see how that market performance is going, particularly around the economic influences through the last 12 months. So, particularly with the cost of living pressures, I think everyone's heard the word inflation at least once a week for the last 52 weeks. And I think we're starting to see a maturity of that trend, particularly looking at the last 12 months, but then also looking at the next 12 months. We're starting to see slowdowns of that post-COVID change, and we're starting to see a lot more stability. I think that's probably the biggest call out is that a lot of the macroeconomic influences that we've been seeing around people being able to actually go out and spend around travel, being able to get out of the house and spend around, dining, being able to make sort of different selections of buying behavior rather than just what's been in the home traditionally the last couple of years. A lot of that turbulence is whilst we're still facing, I guess, the onflow of that, we're starting to see a more stable trend into the future of what that looks like as we start to get more stable on GDP. We're starting to see more stability across the board as we kind of move on into the second half of this decade. So that's been a really big trend, but we are starting to see a lot of market shifts around market share. So I think what's been really interesting in the last 12 months, particularly in an Australian context, is when we look at particular industries, we used to have, let's say, 5 big players. Now you only have 4 because there have been a bunch of market exits. There have been some companies that have just had to fold because of the economic environment. And so there is still quite a shift happening in a market share perspective where even if there's a, single or double-digit CAGR growth, there's still a significant market share shift happening because of the disruption that's happening across the market players. So what that actually translates to in buying trends, it will likely mean that there will be a kind of a change in customer experience in terms of what's available in the market. When you're going out shopping, you're probably going to see some lesser brands when you go to the shopping center, some closed shops or lease open for leases, but I think in that stead it also creates an opportunity for new brands to enter the market, for there to be new startups and new experiences that are unlocked because of that. So looking forward, I think for the Australian consumer, it's to see how they look at their buying behavior, both with the traditional major players, but also to see some new emerging players enter the market.
And as Michael, it's a great point. And as we see that trickling down, Huckleberry, we work exclusively with purpose-driven companies, and so and they're usually on the sort of medium to small scale of businesses.
Excuse me, just if I can say, Wayne, can you switch off your camera? We're getting some also sounds from some other people talking. So if you can switch off all of your, that'd be great. Thank you. Sorry.
Thanks. There you go. No, that's all right. I think, so we work with purpose-driven companies, and they're traditionally on the sort of medium to smaller scale. So we're really seeing that emphasis on every marketing dollar needing to work super hard. So it's really cutting through with creativity to get that message through and making sure that trickles down into a sale, because every dollar is really being watched at the moment as we are seeing that softening in the economy.
Mm-hmm. And I think that it has a lot to do from marketing in terms of creating those really immersive customer experiences as well. And I think that leads to your point, Lockie, about, every dollar being used in a really efficient and effective way is how can we cut through all of the marketing chatter? And I think a lot of that has to do with personalization. I think a lot of that has to do with customer experience and leveraging the technologies that we have to be able to do that now.
Thanks for that. So when we're talking about markets and current situation, how dynamic is the market now from your perspective in terms of, I guess, maybe one to 10?
Hard to. It's probably been a 10 for us, George. Again, like on that smaller scale, I think people are really having to look week to week on where can they afford to spend, how is that spend going to be optimized, and really in that spirit of
working super hard to make sure that things are effective and efficient. That last sort of 6 to 10 weeks, we're definitely seeing that dynamism ramp right up. So I think it's just really focusing on having an emergent and adaptable strategy to how you do your marketing, and not just being set and forget, which is sort of how we build and try and make sure we look after people.
Anybody else wants to add?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there's been a lot of conversations I've been personally involved in around customer acquisition. So I think that many customers are looking at, what is that comparison year on year? And depending on which sector you're in, it could be either looking really good because there's more people moving around and doing things, but for some it may be looking not so good because, the way buyers have been spending has changed in the last 12 months too. And so it has been, I think, a really important thing to talk about customer acquisition with the clients. And a lot of that has actually, and to India's point on personalization, that's actually become a really hot topic for many clients that now understand that digital is a must-have, not simply a nice-to-have. And so how to create differentiated digital customer experiences has become front of mind for many of those clients, and that typically also ties in quite strongly with loyalty. So as personalization helps to really build a unique experience, naturally that also means that that particularly in a retailer context, there needs to be a stronger lineage on what data is captured and shared so that the personalization can take shape. But in saying that as well, the technologies that we have available in the market do provide some sort of personalization light capabilities, even if you're not identified. So particularly as you're browsing and you're exploring the web, there's still opportunities to help curate content and to create a differentiated experience, even without needing to necessarily be identified as an individual.
Absolutely. And I actually think to that point, there needs to be a stronger focus on retention. We talk a lot about CPA and all of those really great things about acquisition, but retention, especially, I mean, we're in B2B at ShipEasy. So our focus is on, ensuring that once we've captured that lead, we've got them onboarded, that we retain them. There's a lot of competitors out there, and I think it's easy for especially in the SaaS space that we're in, people to jump from ship to ship. So ensuring that we've got a really strong retention program is really key. And in a lot of ways, it straddles across CX, so customer experience, and making sure that our marketing goes all the way right through deep into that sort of mode.
It's a good point in terms of retention as well. And we say that's a data enrichment play as much as anything for us too. So how can you bring together those different bands of whether it's your own content on your website, your customer journeys via an email, but continuing to enrich your understanding of customers and how they're looking into you and what element of your community that you're fostering are they really resonating with. And that's kind of whether it is a B2B or a B2C space. I think owning that first party data and really enriching your own database, that's something that's only going to continue to get more and more important as Google looks to eventually phase things out. So we're seeing that too.
Fantastic. So we've got customer acquisition, personalization, loyalty, retention. Which of these or which of the others that actually work in 2023, you think? Well, for you anyway, or work the best?
I like that, George. Which of them actually work? We really I think ultimately we think about it in terms of how do you actually become known and become famous in your category, and then really after that, then you tie up the performance in terms of connecting to that demand. So it is old is new again. It is really just about really understanding what your brand's all about, becoming famous for that, and connecting it down and distilling it quite simply into that. So what actually works is not just thinking in channel specific and not just thinking in those sort of siloed fashions around a channel, but it's actually what are we becoming known for, what are we becoming famous for, and then having the right data strategies, the right community strategies behind that, so that you're connecting that demand and continuing to get smarter about how you target. And we see that's the way it works. And you mentioned Frank Green, one of our clients, the sort of fame building moments that they've managed to capture, whether it's with a lucky bag campaign or a Bunnings trend around a pipe holder. it's converting those actual like fame building moments into e-commerce moments. So I think that's, you know, it's not a new trend necessarily, but it's just reaffirming what we have always known about building really strong brands.
Building super fans.
That's it.
Yeah. Frank Green, I think, specifically tapped into emotion really well on an item that necessarily didn't have any emotion around it. I don't know whether it was a phrase born from Frank Green, but that emotional support water bottle, it's definitely something that I associate with the Frank Green brand. It's interesting.
Yeah, it's a good one. And that's actually about listening to what customers are talking about and then turning it into a moment. So being part of that community, and the team at Frank Green did a really good job about seeing how people were talking about things and jumping onto that. So it's not just one way broadcast these days. It's a dialogue with your customers and making sure that you're relevant and continue to stay relevant.
Exactly.
On that point, there's probably something to call out around how the demographics and customers themselves are changing. So particularly around, you know, the push for sustainability, how customers are demanding more information about the products themselves, the transparency of where these goods have been sourced from, how have they been treated and manufactured, and you know, where was the labor sourced from around the world. I think particularly in the more informed consumers, I think they're making more informed decisions nowadays and choosing brands with purpose rather than what traditionally could have just been a good product on the shelf. You know, I think one of the potential reasons that particularly the younger millennial and alpha segments are now starting to really change their behaviors is that now that they're becoming mindful and aware of these sort of global circumstances, this will have an on-flow effect into retail and spend because they are choosing more purpose-led brands that drive sustainability, that reinvest profits into future growth and social change. And also we're starting to see, you know, particularly shifts around packaging and commitments to plastic, that a lot of packaging is changing towards whether it be bamboo or reusable and recyclable materials. And that kind of contributes to a circular economy at a more kind of holistic macro level, where we're starting to see, you know, smarter cities thinking about how do they manage plastics and waste, and to a degree even some of the retailers are involved with those programs, particularly around reuse and recycling. So I think whilst to be more specific on, you know, buying behavior, the point really is that I think as brands wake up to what is important to their customer segments, that has an on-flow effect into their business models, because they appreciate that you might be a 30-year-old business, but you're not necessarily ready for the future as these buying behaviors continue to adapt and change with the changes of consumer segments.
It's interesting, Michael. I actually wish I agreed more. Like, we're seeing quite the opposite. So a lot of people will, in a survey, say that they're going to want to buy more sustainably, and the lip service will be there from these businesses in a white paper. But when it comes to actually making a decision around, am I going to pay $2 more for this thing, or, you know, are we as a big retailer going to invest in packaging that can be more circular? We're kind of not seeing it. With a lot of the businesses that we're working with and talking to, for example, I even know some sustainable packaging businesses have stopped taking meetings from the biggest retailers in the country just purely because they're wasting their time with well-intentioned, but ultimately not making the right commercial decisions. So I think as we do move forward, it's really about, you know, yes, the world needs these things to happen, but also how do we make these brands really sexy? Like, you know, to use the Frank Green example, like, people aren't buying it because it's sustainable necessarily, it's because it's awesome and it's hot. And so I think just like that, understanding customers, and we see it all the time. People will say one thing on a survey, but they don't do the buying habit doesn't follow up. So I think it's just almost understanding that human behavior from our perspective and optimizing and building these brands so that we grow to be able to afford that and potentially reach up to that margin that we know that we're going to need to get to. But people aren't willing to spend.
I think the regular consumer, though, has been put off a little bit by the greenwashing that's happened a little bit across a lot of industries. And I think, to Michael's point, I do think that that's going to change in the coming years for sure. I mean, we're seeing it definitely in supply chain. The visibility that you need to have from, you know, the supplier to the end, you know, port of destination, they're very aware of the fact that their consumer is going to need some trackable evidence of where things have come from.
I hope so. Yeah, good.
Yeah, yeah.
But the also consumer behaviors do change due to the all other influences that are happening currently on the market, and interest rates rising, and they being more aware of how they spend, where they spend, and perhaps all of that is sort of contributing to you know what's happening, and what sells and what people buy. I have a few more questions, and want to say again, if anybody else has some questions, this is quite flowy conversation so far. I'm so happy about it. Don't have to ask much. India, you're into B2B marketing, and how do you see that sort of being evolved over time, and especially now in this very tricky markets? How's that from your perspective?
Yeah, so I think to Lockie's point, I heard him mention old is new again, and I think that definitely is where B2B marketing is heading. I was at a conference last month in the States talking to executives from Walmart and Amazon about how we can specifically market towards them. And a lot of them were saying they want partnerships, they want connection, they want community, they want skin in the game from anyone that's coming to them with a solution-based platform or a solution-based product. They want that genuine care and connection with, you know, what they're currently facing. And I think, again, to Lockie's point about having the data in your system to know exactly what you're trying to solve for them is really important. I think they've become very numb to the idea of being put into a sales funnel and, you know, segmented out in sequences and emails and cold communications like that. I think that they need more one-to-one. And I think coming out of the pandemic and doing a lot of this sort of communication, more face-to-face is definitely where I think we're seeing better value for our marketing dollar. And they're just wanting partnership at the end of the day. They want to get into bed with somebody that's also really passionate about what they're involved in and their pain points. So that's definitely the change that I'm seeing. One of the big takeaways was ungating content. If you've got anything gated at the moment, ungate it. See if you've got a better download rate, a better cost per acquisition based on what you're providing for free. I think that, like I said, they're very numb to the techniques that we've employed for the last couple of years, and I think there needs to be a shake-up.
Yeah, that's really good. And I think like the other side of it for B2B, it's such in market from a marketing sense, a sales-driven type of marketing usually, and it is that very transactional, very sales funnel kind of thing. I think LinkedIn Institute have done some really great stuff around looking at how brands grow within a B2B environment. And what they found is that this 95-5 rule. So 95% of your customers are currently out of market for your products. So how are you actually just being a bit creative and a bit fun and, you know, putting your brand out there so that people know you exist? And then when they do enter a moment to transact, you're coming to top of mind. And so it is like, it's really B2C traditionally thinking to be building a brand, and B2B usually gets packaged with the boring stuff. But I think that what's nice is that we're starting to see some really nice B2B work coming to market around just growing good brands.
Absolutely. Yep, I would definitely agree with that. And I think, yeah, being involved in the conversation, specifically if you're targeting a specific industry, I think ShipEasy do this so well, is that we're involved in the associations and the organizations around supply chain and the moving industry. And we're there at the forefront of those conversations. And I think that's really important because it shows that you're married to the industry that you're serving. And again, that's what they're after. That's what they need. That's what they want. And interesting that a lot of I would have said maybe 80% of the executives that I spoke to, their decision making comes from word of mouth still. So you can do all of the white papers and all of the case studies, but they're still going to call up people in their network and say, do you know this company? How good are they with, you know, what they provide? Or I think that's, again, old is new. And I think that we need to lean into that.
It's incredible to see, you know, after pandemic, being locked up and not being able to actually communicate with people really want to go back to one-on-one and have those experiences, have that sort of social interaction. It seems very logical. It seems very logical what we're going through. But there's a couple of more questions that I'm very excited about to ask you. They kind of lead one into another, and it's a hot topic, or at least it was a couple of months ago. What about AI? AI, how will that change the marketing and everything? There's a range of emotions around what would AI do, and we all got to taste what that is. Me, myself, personally as well. I'm seeing that there's a lot more restrictions now with the ChatGPT having all this because of using other people's data and that sort of stuff. So it's going to be dumber, if I can say that, but still it's very powerful. And maybe a question: are you using it, and how will that change if you're not? And obviously, knowing really well your industry, how will that change potentially how we market?
I love this conversation. I love this topic. I love AI. I think there's two schools of thought. I think the first one is, oh my God, AI is coming for our jobs. I don't think that's the case. I don't think that will ever be the case. And the other one is, AI is such a fantastic tool to use as a marketer. I think that there is such a delicate balance, though, that we need to strike up against using AI and then also human first content and communication. But moving back to that B2B point about the need for that direct communication and interaction, I think pushing tasks and things that AI can handle in a way that, you know, takes up our time, frees up our time in other areas to really connect and get on the same level as the consumers and the customers that we're trying to connect with. So I think AI definitely has a place in marketing. I'm not scared about it. Lean in. It's great.
Yeah, we're also on the front foot of it. So some of the things we're working on, particularly in our labs, is we are looking at how do we build sustainable business practices around AI, particularly considering the I would say, you know, the disruptive nature of it. I think with any new technologies, there's going to be a sort of a force for good and the force for not so good, right? So for us to take a front foot on it, we are looking at ways in which we can adapt the right frameworks and business models to inform those who we work with. Typically, we are tapped on the shoulders to have a voice at the table of those conversations. So it's great. I think, you know, being a major brand and logo, it gives us the opportunity to be recognized as a voice in that conversation and to have that perspective. And I think even looking forward, I think it's an opportunity to think differently, to challenge the status quo of how, you know, work is done and how it's being done, and then to think about how to blend, you know, a mixture of emerging technologies and innovations together that are empowered by AI. You know, things that have been kind of held back because they weren't smart enough. Here's AI, and it's generative, and it's kind of propelling these technologies forward the same way, you know, we've been seeing kind of the emergence of smart devices and technologies in the last decade. I think AI is kind of the brain of all that will now help it propel into new use cases and really leverage a force for good in where a lot of emerging businesses are looking to go to.
That's great. George, I thought you were almost going to set a record for being the first panel in 2023 that didn't talk about AI. But where we see it, I think like it's exciting from a creative perspective. So a lot of people would say, you know, is this the death of advertising? Is it the death of creativity? I actually think this is going to push in the golden age of the best creatives really coming to the fore. And so you're not going to be able to replace taste. You're not going to be able to replace good human emotional ideas. And so I think like you use AI for what it's good for, and that's, you know, let's get the 20 ideas that are generic, and if you're touching any of that, push harder. And I think that's a really exciting thing to push everyone forward. To Michael's point, which is a really good one, it's going to be able to be the brain behind bringing some of these ideas to the forefront that maybe weren't quite possible, you know, whether it's voice or the other sort of IoT things that we're talking about. But I think, you know, being able to push forward, being able to produce faster, but then ultimately letting the best creative and the best quality really stand up, I'm sure we're gonna get absolutely awash with AI-driven think pieces on LinkedIn. That's so really good quality content that has a human perspective, and it's going to stand out even more. And that's the rush to quality that I'm excited for.
Absolutely.
I'm thinking we're gonna be in the next panel arguing, is this AI or is this human kind of?
Yeah. But I think, I think there's going to be a learning like curve for us as consumers of content to really realize that's AI generated. I mean, even now I can pick it.
I can
Yeah. And I think it'll be an interesting wave to see how Google handles it. I'm sort of sitting to see whether they start penalizing, AI generated content and sort of optimizing human first content across their network. So that'll be a really interesting time when they come to the fore and figure out what they're doing.
And I'm excited about that exact point, Indy, from a rush back to trust. So we've had our publishers and traditional media have been taken to the woodshed for the last 15, 20 years by this digital media. Ultimately, like, how are we going to be able to trust things? And it's being able to associate with a trusted brand like a publisher or out of home. And so how do we give, as brands, associate ourselves to these kind of trusted brands that we know that, yes, that's a legitimate message out in market and that's a legitimate brand out in market. I think that's an interesting one to watch, how people respond there too.
Yeah, and I also think how we handle our customer service and customer experience again with the rush to AI is also going to be a really huge competitive edge for somebody that does that right. I think chatbots are poo and rubbish, and I just wish that they would go away because by the time I've gotten to the point where I need to chat to somebody, I've already looked through all of the documentation. I've troubleshooted myself. I'm a generation that does that. The next generation will do that even better than me. So when I need to speak to somebody, I've gone through all of the steps myself. I don't want a chatbot that's, circular conversation. So I think that there's a really good opportunity for people to do that right. And I'm excited about that because I'd love to talk to a person again.
Well, there's some people who agree 100% with you from the chat, and I know it's very frustrating getting into a chat bot and it's telling you the basic things that you already know. It's not really addressing what your problem is, but maybe with ChatGPT and AI, it could actually scan an entire website and tell you exactly what you need. And if that's not help, then it actually had to sort of do something similar. And I was like, oh my God, I'm going to be stuck in this loop, and I'm not going to fix my issue. And then 3 days later, maybe still be in the same position. But this other chat that I was doing, I was like, can I speak to human? And they're like, okay, cool. Here it is. Whereas a lot of chats, they actually don't allow you to speak to human. That's another I guess, issue. But moving forward, if there's any questions, please ask. I'm also feeling like AI is enabling a tool for a lot of things to happen. I'm seeing AI sort of produce movies. There's a lot of different things that you can do with AI as a tool. And I guess how we use this tool and how we obviously package it, and some companies also doing their own versions of I guess AI to facilitate what you India said. How do we handle customer experience? How they feel safe to use their data?
Shopify has actually just come out with a chat GPT version, AI version to use across their platforms as well. So that's definitely coming.
Yes, because we're sharing our data with ChatGPT, and they're using that for learning and that kind of stuff. So if you're a customer, you want to sort of make sure that, your data stays yours, especially in enterprise level. How do we do that? And I see some companies, big companies, are sort of thinking that way. And I guess that leads into what's next year. What could we expect next year? This is where it's at. It's very hard to predict. It's been like this maybe a couple of years. It's very hard to predict 3 months ahead, but I don't know. Give it a try based on what you know now. Maybe let's see where it takes us next year.
Yeah, I think we're going to see a blend between AI and perhaps immersive customer experiences that are happening from a sort of lead generating or consumer sort of sort of framework. But yeah, I'm excited to see how that works. I know Virgin Cruises came out with Gen AI. I don't know if anybody saw that, but essentially Jennifer Lopez could walk you through
Oh,
your
it's
entire
great.
trip, and she was talking to you as if you were standing there. It was clunky, but it had a really good bones to it, and I'm really excited to see what comes up there. But I think there's going to be more regulations around AI as we move forward. I mean, we're already seeing it with Hollywood sort of picketing about, AI generated content there. And there's just so many things that I think need to be addressed before we can really let loose on it. But yeah, I'm excited. I love AI. Bring it on.
It's a little force of nature.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, I think like the Shopify example brought up was a really good one in terms of how, an organization can sit on top of a large language model and then build their layer that makes their product even richer. And so I think just like that's the exciting bit for me is, not necessarily having a prompt buddy that sits there and feeds me back stuff that I need to know, but how do some of these really innovative companies use it and plug in and be that layer over the top of that data? Because I think ultimately everyone's going to end up with relatively similar sort of stack that they're sitting on. It's what's that layer that they build on top so that it does become a really rich experience. So, the baseline standard of an e-commerce site on Shopify is just going to go through the roof because there's going to be a sidekick saying, hey, this is how Gymshark does it,
Yeah.
and I think that's a really cool thing.
Yep.
I think it will evolve smart products. So if we think of like the last 10 years have been all about how do we get like Wi-Fi and network enabled products, I think this will be the next evolution to say, okay, now that it's smart and connected, now can it actually think for itself, self-diagnose, self-resolve, and I think there's probably an accessibility and inclusion layer to this as well, where an AI, if we split the difference between AI and generative AI is very much taught based on rules, and it's kind of a if then do this, whereas generative AI can be more personalized in the sense of, okay, if then but also this condition, then this is the response to give. So I think it will unlock a lot of opportunities for product manufacturers to create more personalized product experiences. If we think of, I think, personalization a lot in the digital experience up to now, I think this will be the advent into AI moving into more physical and interactive products, where previously that has been one of the barriers to doing that. So I think that is going to be a hot thing to watch in the next sort of 12 to 24 months, especially with like CES in January next year. I'm always excited with that event. And I think AI will probably be the token word for most of those next generation products. It's how is your product interfacing with AI, whereas previously it was how smart is your product. So I think that it might be a nuanced wording, but it's going to be important for how competitive products are in the future, and by extension where consumers spend their dollars on those products.
Yeah, fantastic. How do you add AI to your current portfolio or build new products to enable a lot more services and experiences? It's very good.
I think AI is about giving people back time, honestly. And I think from a marketing perspective, it's, to Lockie's point, like it's giving us back the ability to be creative. And I think that if we give AI the tasks that take a lot of our time up in terms of, data and sort of sorting out and reporting and all of those sorts of tasks, baseline stuff, I think it frees us up to be a bit more creative. And that is really exciting. I do think it's a golden age as well. I think we're coming into a really fun and exciting time.
It's an interesting point, India, because we've been slowly kind of robbed from our time because there's so many channels opening, and now it's not one channel, it's like all channels, and so you have to be present everywhere. It's not like one thing works, and so potentially this will kind of help us streamline this a little bit more and be smarter about how it posts, and probably might know what time to post, and you can schedule it a lot better, and with time will tell, but it's definitely we can feel it now. It's a potential. I think a lot of people sort of had a taste this year, definitely.
Yeah, and I think if you look back at anything that's disrupted an industry or a workspace, it's been a great thing in the end. For example, when you look at Netflix, we've got more shows. If you look at Airbnb, we've got more properties to look at. And I think that there's, you know, a real value in disrupting, you know, the status quo.
Yeah, it's opening new things.
Lean into it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we kind of came to the end. I'm not sure if anybody else has questions, but this AI question was kind of burning on somebody's mind for sure. We could have not had discussion about marketing and not mention it. I think currently that we see it how it works. I think we've gone through a lot of things. Is there anything else you guys want to add to the conversation today?
No, I think we covered a lot of good stuff.
Yeah.
No, I think it's good, George. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, we might as well wrap it up here. I wanted to thank you all guys for being part of it. Keep it short and sweet, half an hour. We're getting some claps. Thanks, team. We will post this online. So if you want to sort of reference it back again and watch it, thanks, Joe. It's been a pleasure. See you next week, everybody else that wants to sort of attend. We'll be talking something else. Thanks, Gabriella. And have a great Friday and the weekend.
Excellent.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye all. Thanks.
Bye.
See you.